Okay. All right. So let's get started and introduce our speakers for today. So today we have two speakers actually. The first one is Jeannie Marie Viviani. So Jeannie is the Director of Research Development at FAU. She has more than 20 years of grant management and research development experience. Before she joined FAU, she has founded and directed two other research offices here in Florida. Hi, Jeannie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Our second speaker is Angela Clear. Angela is the Associate Director of Research Development at FAU. She also has over 20 years of experience in research administration, science writing and editing, and she actually worked for the NIH before joining FAU. Welcome, Angela. Thank you for being here. So I think we're gonna start with Jeannie, right? So I'm gonna give you the stage and welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen with everyone. Super. We are really excited to be giving this talk for you as postdocs here at FAU and collaborating with the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. We really believe truly that the postdocs are an incredible part of the research portfolio that we have here at FAU. You're part of a large continuum, if you will, of not only students, but faculty who pursue research as well as funding. So we were just really delighted to be invited to have a talk like this. And we know that this is always one of those topics that as a postdoc, among other things, finding funding, the focus being on the funding. So with that, let me go forward here. And what I'm gonna do is, there we go. So what I'd like to do here is just kind of go over, an agenda here of what our talk is going to cover. I'll talk a little bit about the Office of Research Development. And for those of you who don't know, I always want to make sure I provide this information. We are part of the Division of Research at FAU. So the Division of Research it includes many other offices other than just research development. Obviously, the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs is one of them. Offices sponsored programs, so that if you already are on a grant, you will be communicating with them, or with research accounting in terms of if you're being funded off of a grant. Research integrity, research compliance, so if you have human subjects or animal models. So we all make up one division of research. So the Office of Research Development is just a part of that, and will be describing to you what we do and what we offer. Specifically for the presentation, we will cover the fundamentals. Now, the problem with the fundamentals is as we approach this talk for you as postdocs, we kind of got lost in the weeds of maybe we should be focusing on specific solicitations and other things. What we found is that it's better to set the stage with you directly in terms of what's available, or what you need to do in order to focus on funding, rather than necessarily going into the nitty-gritty of solicitation. So we really want you to think holistically about your approach to funding, not only as a postdoc, but even moving out further, that if you move out from this postdoc, this will help you in your career in general, just these great ideas that we want to be able to do. With that, in this particular presentation, we're not going to be giving you specific links in this presentation, but after the presentation is over, you will get an email that will have a supplementary document that we compiled that has links in it of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So this way you can just focus on just what we have to say and asking your questions, and then you'll have supplementary information to be able to use afterwards. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So let me introduce the Office of Research Development. Obviously, Lorena has already introduced myself and Angela Clear. So those are contact information there. Again, that will be provided on the supplementary document. But we also wanted to introduce Regina Thompson. She's new to our office, and it's part of a strategy that the Office of the Vice President of Research, Dr. Dan Flynn, is focusing on in terms of economic development and technology development. We do have an Office of Technology Development at FAU. And what we're trying to do in ORD is kind of bridge that knowledge. So when faculty, or even as you as a postdoc, come to us with help on or asking for help for funding, we want to remind you too that you know, things are a little bit different. Long gone are the days where you're just doing this just to get that academia, that academic career path. Very much likely that you have certain innovations or intellectual property, IP, that you want to generate and perhaps maybe spin off a company. We want to facilitate that bridge, if you will, between what we can provide you and in terms of knowledge and working with other offices on campus, or maybe even finding something different. So wanted to let you know that that's part of that. She's part of that team as well. Okay. Along with what we do in the Office of Research Development is we focus on the whole professor. And likewise for you as a postdoc, we would focus on you as well. And we call it the 4 C's. So let me run through what those 4 C's are so that you get a better understanding of what they are. So first and foremost, we coach. We provide one-on-one support for you as a postdoc, as a faculty member, even graduate students, with proposal development. We offer workshops. One of our flagship programs that Angela was spearheaded last year and that has been very successful is our Early Career Academy. So we provide a lot of training, coaching materials, and support. We also create boilerplate language for your proposals. So this way it's consistent with the university's statistics and other types of information. And we certainly can help provide with standard data on that as well. We also curate. We try to get out of the business of actually doing funding searches for you, but we can provide you information on how to do those searches, which again, you'll get that in the supplementary document later. We also do limited submissions. So there are opportunities out there which only allow an institution to have 1 or 2, you know, applicants. And so we manage that process internally for the university in the selection of who that particular person, PI, would be. We also connect. So we can help you with team development, connect you with external resources. We would also, again, work with you on technology development, invention disclosures, and the like. All right, so your quest begins. What we really wanted to kind of point out to you is funding searches really run throughout your career life. Whether you're an undergraduate looking for research experiences in the summer labs, or you're an established career faculty member applying for independent research awards, you're always going to be on this quest for finding funding. That's always going to be on the back of your mind. That quest doesn't have to be daunting though. And at every level, a lot of the information that we're providing you today can be applied for the same kind of searches that you want to do. So for right now, we're trying to focus on you as the postdoc, but a lot of the information in this particular webinar could be applicable to somebody who's in a PhD program or graduate student looking for a postdoctoral opportunity. So we want to make sure that you know, we're not just solely looking at you only as a postdoc. This could also be applicable to you as an early career investigator as well. But if your quest begins, but what we're kind of worried about is where do you start if you're already a postdoc? So regardless of where you really are, you have to think about where you are going. And that's really the most critical piece here, because you already are here as a postdoc. But we have to think about, okay, well, where are you going? We kind of look at it in 3 different ways. So the first thing, of course, is looking at a postdoctoral fellowship outside of FAU. We know you're here, but you may be looking for other opportunities, either at the end of your postdoc here, or perhaps you're just starting out and you might want to add something onto it. We're also looking at, we'll also talk a little bit about looking for funding inside of FAU, and also looking to be funded with your FAU mentor. So there's 2 different types of internal funding. It's the best way to kind of describe it. But we'll go into that, into those specifics. But really what's most important is that you plan accordingly, and that you, when you're looking at opportunities, that you look for these particular these particular pathways. So the first one I want to discuss is the external postdoc fellowship. And by external, what we really mean by that is that you would perhaps be doing the postdoctoral fellowship at another academic institution. So for instance, let's say you already are close to the end of your postdoctoral fellowship here, and you're looking for possibly another postdoctoral fellowship, or you're possibly looking for an opportunity to kind of bridge something else, maybe at a federal R&D lab would also be a possibility. For instance, DoD offers a lot of 12-month postdoctoral fellowships that can be renewed on an annual basis, depending on the research that's being done. Also part of this mix is corporate appointments or an industry postdoc. And this is really a burgeoning area for postdocs. Long gone are the days that was kind of just seen as just a backup plan. They're actually starting to be seen more as an avenue of first choice. For instance, just, you may not be interested in going an academic route. You may want to go into corporate R&D. So those are other opportunities that you have to kind of consider, is this right for me? So we want to do a lot of soul searching about where you're headed. Okay. The next one, what we want to talk about is the internal and independent postdoctoral fellowship. And the difference between independent and mentored, I'm going to explain that in these two slides here. But the internal has more to do with the funding. All of you who are on this call are funded in some way by FAU. Now, whether that's from FAU itself or whether it's through someone's grant or some other type of fellowship, but it still flows through FAU. So all of you are funded from FAU in some way. But in this case, for internal independent, there are plenty of fellowships that are out there that would give you money to continue your independent work here at FAU, meaning it's your research idea, it's your research program, and so you might be looking for funding to support your specific goals. It might fit or dovetail with your FAU faculty mentor here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the exact same research. And that leads us, of course, to internal and mentored. You might be currently funded under a grant award for a faculty member here, and you're the postdoc on that grant. And that's a typical or traditional postdoctoral type of fellowship. But there are other types of fellowships too that basically give you funding from very competitive grant programs like NIH and NSF. So those types of funding, you might be working more closely with your mentor because the research might need to be closer tied to what they're doing in their particular lab. So those are the three different ways of thinking about your postdoctoral fellowship. So once you've kind of gotten the lay of the land for those directions or the process or the what you're thinking about in terms of your fellowship, and maybe you're not even sold on it, preparation is still key. So you might still be doing a lot of soul searching for what you want to do. So it's important to strategize and kind of set a tone for what you want to be able to do. You can never be over-prepared for doing any of the things that we're suggesting. And we would encourage you to always go back and reflect on your research and on the funding that you want to go for. There can come a point where the amount of information can be pretty overwhelming, but the trick really is to break it down into various pieces and activities. You may want to dedicate 1 to 3 months just to get prepared for things that you want to apply for. We know that it comes up all the time because we get faculty who are current faculty who come to us and say, hey, there's an opportunity and it's due in 3 weeks. That does happen because you don't always have your eye on everything. But the important thing is if you could be looking now, you could be planning a lot more for a stronger proposal to go out. So by strategizing, what we also say is we really want you to be thinking about, do you have an ORC ID? Have you used Science CV? Have you kept your own CV up to date? Have you tried doing a biosketch if you have ORC ID and Science CV? And these are tools that are free, that are out on the web. And again, we will give you the supplementary documentation so you can kind of look that up. But the important thing is to always keep that up to date. There's other things you can be doing too in terms of keeping things up to date, and that includes reading articles in your area of expertise or maybe complementary areas of expertise. We also, the idea behind here is to be thinking about, and Angela coined a great phrase called fall into the future. And essentially you want to be thinking about your research program 5 to 10 years out. So yeah, it does require you maybe grabbing a cup of coffee and going to the beach and thinking about what you want to do, but that is very important to do when you're thinking about funding, because it does take a lot of work to put forth a lot of these proposals. We also offer many different tools and resources here at FAU that are free. There's also external types of resources that you can also use. For instance, at FAU, we have Grant Forward as a tool to look up funding opportunities, and you can search by postdoctoral fellowship. We also don't want to reinvent the wheel. And while the Office of Postdoctoral Fellows has worked diligently to maintain a really robust website for information for all of you, including webinars just like this, we can't always keep a static list up to date. But there are other academic institutions that do it for us. So why reinvent the wheel? Johns Hopkins is a good example of being able to have a list of up-to-date postdoctoral fellowship. So utilize anything that's out there that you can collect that information. There's also ways to collect samples of successful proposals. Obviously, ask if you have colleagues that are postdocs, or maybe even your faculty mentors can find you some successful examples. It's always good to get an idea of how they structured them. Again, there's another free resource called the Grad Cafe, and they have something called the Bank, and they have tons and tons and tons of successful proposals that are out there. And we also encourage you to attend as many workshops that are out there, not only ours at FAU, but external ones as well. So things like the DoD offers workshops. NIH has a website that has workshop related material on it as well. NSF, you can attend any one of their conferences in the past where they have program officers and such talking. So we encourage you to really look at other resources that are out there to kind of educate you about process or about funding opportunities. And with that, what I'm going to do is hand it over to Angela for the next couple of slides.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Jeannie. Basically, what I'm going to do now is take it from Jeannie. And what we want to do is propose 3 practical steps that you might want to take as you're looking to get your grant funding. And so the first step in that process is what we call discuss. And by saying discuss, what I'm really saying is we don't want you to talk to everyone and their mother about your research and what your research goals are. But basically, we want you to start, and Jeannie mentioned this earlier, about refining what your research niche is going to be. Who are you going to be in your research career? What do you want to be 5 years from now? How are you different from your colleagues that are in your field? And the reason that we ask you to talk this out with your mentor and trusted colleagues and people that you really respect is that you're going to be asked that on grant proposals. For example, most grant proposals in some form or another, they're going to ask you what's innovative about your research. They're also going to ask, how are you filling a gap in the field in your research? You may say, my research is in the area of HIV, but what gap are you filling in that field? Another thing that you want to think about is, what is unique about you? Why are you uniquely qualified to carry out this research? So the idea is, in talking this out with your peers, with your colleagues, with your mentors, you get feedback, and then by the time you write it down, you've got it clear in your head. So we encourage you to discuss your goals with your colleagues. Another thing that we also say is create, and we alluded to this earlier. Grant funding is often a numbers game. So what you want to do is, if you're going to write something, if you can maximize your effort by creating boilerplate material, standard cover letters, a CV, answers to typical applicant questions, then you're really maximizing your work, and you're increasing your ability to put multiple grant opportunities out there and increase your chances of getting funding. So while we have a lot of boilerplate that we can supply you on common grant opportunities, creating your own boilerplate, creating that little file that you have is really going to serve you well, not only now as a postdoc, but going into the future. Finally, we say apply, and by no means am I saying apply right now, but what I want you to do is to commit to applying for something 3 to 6 months down the line. And when you commit to doing that, then you can kick into place some steps of what you need to do. So make that commitment now. Identify 2 to 3 funding opportunities that might be a good fit for you. And then reach out to, if it's a PI at a particular external lab, reach out to the PI. If it's a particular funding agency, reach out to that program officer. Have what you wrote down in the discuss phase and reach out to them and say, am I a fit for your agency? Do you see something novel in this? Would I be able to apply to your funding program? Am I a fit? So commit to applying for something in 3 to 6 months, and then the steps will follow after that. Let's see. So as Jeannie mentioned earlier, we're not going to go into all of the different funding agencies that are available to you, but what we wanted to do is just give you a snapshot of who are the top federal funders for postdoctoral research. As we mentioned before, NIH, I spent some time there back in the 90s, so I'm dating myself, but NIH is the National Institutes of Health. And NIH is known as the largest biomedical research agency in the US. And we make that distinction because by contrast, NSF is the nation's largest basic research agency. So you'll see that if your focus is not on biomedical research or medical research or clinical research or even behavioral research that has some sort of health outcome, NIH may not be a fit for you. But just to give you a quick snapshot, they're called the Institutes of Health because there's 27 institutes and centers. Each of those institutes and centers has a different disease focus, a different discipline focus. There's heart, lung, and blood. There's the Cancer Institute. If any of you have seen any of the news with Dr. Fauci on it, he heads the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at NIH. Many wrongly assume he heads NIH, but Francis Collins is actually the one that heads NIH. Most applications are typically due 3 times per year at NIH. There are some that have specific deadlines, but in general, you can count on a particular funding or deadline schedule for NIH. And we always encourage you to start early, 6 to 9 months. I think I mentioned 3 to 6 months, but really the earlier the better that you can prepare, is great. Going on to NSF, many of you may have heard of also the National Science Foundation. Nothing to sneeze at, their budget is about $8 billion. And a lot of people are surprised by how much research NSF funds, but they are focused on basic research, fundamental research, the fundamental processes underlying some sort of mechanism, how a cell operates, things like that. More and more their focus, I think, and Jeannie can probably explain this later, is moving towards a lot of computer technology, a lot of artificial intelligence, but they still go back to their core research interests. NSF has about 7 directorates with multiple divisions within those directorates. Their application deadlines are going to vary by division. In some cases, NSF has gone to a cycle where they have an open deadline process that they accept applications on a rolling basis. And really that's just going to vary depending on the funding opportunity. And again, starting early is ideal. We also wanted to just make a brief mention of Department of Defense. A lot of people would be really surprised that the Department of Defense or DoD funds research, but they do. They fund medical research, research that they see as enhancing military personnel health. And a lot of times you'll see that the diseases they fund are the same things that NIH funds. They fund cancer research, they fund arthritis research. They also fund basic research. We have an early faculty now who does computational biology. He studies decision-making. And so his decision-making studies is being funded by DOD to be able to apply that to warfighter decisions. If you're flying a particular airplane and you want to make a decision about going left versus going right, what are the fundamental processes in the brain that govern that process? So the message here is basically, don't be surprised that there are dozens of agencies out there that fund medical research, and they might be funding research in agencies you would not typically expect. Some other considerations and some final considerations. A lot of you are obviously aware of citizenship can be a barrier to finding grant funding, and it is a reality. The best advice that we can give you is to be aware of that eligibility criteria before you start working on a proposal. Jeannie also mentioned Grant Forward. Grant Forward is constantly evolving, and they now have a category when you create your grant search about citizenship. You can literally filter the criteria based on country and be able to find out if a funding opportunity is right for you or whether you're eligible for it. So take advantage again of Grant Forward. It has that really powerful, robust search capability. Also in terms of citizenship, a lot of foundations may likely fund persons that are not citizenship or not citizens, even if the federal government won't. And a lot of times, even with federal proposals, if you're not a citizen, you can still be listed as key personnel on a grant, as long as your PI is a citizen of the United States. Flexibility. So we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier as well, but here in DOR, we really encourage faculty that if they're submitting a grant proposal, if they're submitting something to NOAA or NASA or to NIH, to include in their budget a line item for their postdoc. And the reason we say that is that we want to encourage you getting funding, that first funding to really move your career to the next stage. If you're listed as key personnel, say for instance, on your mentor's proposal, that gives you an opportunity to put that in your CV and say, I was on this grant proposal, I was funded through this grant proposal. So if you're super motivated, you might want to suggest to your mentor and advisor, hey, I found this funding opportunity. Do you want me to help you work on it so that we can get that out the door, and have that person put you on as key personnel. So in closing, and this is by no means the least important, it's actually one of the most important criteria, but writing it's really important to know when you're doing grant writing that proposal writing is really different than academic writing. And if you're really good at academic writing and you know your big words and you know the complicated terminology, you might have to turn that off a bit in proposal writing. You'll want to take more of a persuasive approach. In some cases, you'll want to simplify some really complicated terminology. And you'll also want to simplify really long, complicated sentences. There's a whole universe of material out there about writing for proposals. We also offer some workshops on that topic as well. Another way that you can sort of get feedback on whether your proposal is understandable to folks that are not in your field is, again, to run it by people that aren't in your field and see if they understand it. And if they throw up their hands and say, I don't know what this means, you might want to tone it down a little bit more. So I think that's our final tip, but we're definitely open to any specific questions you have. As we mentioned before, we wanted to make this really high level because there's so much diversity in our postdoc group. Some of you are from Harbor Branch, some of you are from iBrain, some of you are from College of Science. So we're going to go ahead and then just open the floor to questions at this point.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Angela. This is great. I think some of us, or maybe even a lot of us, are just weren't, at least before this workshop, aware of all of the resources that you guys have and that you guys offer. So this is great, and I think especially after that supplementary document that you guys prepared for us, I think that's going to be very helpful to all of us, including the graduate students as well that are here. So as I mentioned in the beginning, and in case some of you joined after the announcements, for this webinar now, our speakers really want to have this as an interactive talk and open this for discussion. Want to hear what are your main questions and concerns in terms of funding. So our Zoom administrator is now starting to enable your camera and video if you want to join and ask a question. Now let's just try and remember to keep our microphones off if you're not talking at the time, just to avoid the background noise. But feel free to raise your hand. You should be able to see a button for raising your hand at the bottom of the list of participants there, or close to your name, depending on what you're using. So yeah, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll let you ask your question, or you can just go on the Q&A and type your question as well. So while this is going, and while our Zoom administrator is giving the permission to all of our attendees, I'm gonna get started with some of the questions that I got on the Q&A already. One of the questions is about, so you mentioned that there are a lot of workshops out there, and there's these databases and lists, right, of postdoc fellowships that are available and all of these resources. So do you offer that on your website, or is there a way that it's, or at least like a website that you would recommend to making it easier for us to get those resources, especially finding those funding opportunities and knowing, you pointed out how important it is, the citizenship, right? So is there a better database to look if you're an international postdoc, or if you have any citizenship impediments there? Is there a better way to look for funding if that's your case, or is there a really good general website that we can look up? Is that something you offer, or do you offer us a link to get there?
Jeannie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the answer on that is yes and no. I love answers like that, because essentially, while we do offer, and when you get the supplementary document, there are links on there that what we would consider the big rocks. So, Stephen Covey has this thing about filling up, the jar. So we do have the big rocks that you would put in the jar first. We have Grant Forward, and we have other types of tools that you could do for searches. We also recommend, Angela brings this up a lot, and a lot of times I even forget about it, is, going to the Web of Science and looking at people who you've read in terms of publications, and going and looking to see what who they've been funded by. That's another strategy in order to look for funding. But to be able to sit there and say, here's one website and that's all you need, is kind of like, that would just be lying. It's just not the way that it works. I think it's a complement of certain things. It's networking with your mentor. It's networking with each other. It's looking at what your research interests are. It's doing all of those little things that are combined together to help you find those opportunities. Sometimes opportunities that present themselves aren't published. You can actually make your own opportunity too. There could be a funding opportunity that you can work with your mentor on, or maybe somebody outside of FAU. So even just to say that there's one website where here you go look at it, it really just doesn't exist. It's a good starter though, that some of the links that we give you. Angela, did you have anything else that you might add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would basically just reiterate again that Grant Forward does have that search capability, or that exclusion criteria, where you can exclude or include funding that's for non-citizens. So I would take advantage of that. I have found that universities that have a high international population tend to have really good lists. FIU, I remember at one point had curated a really good list for graduate students, and they had that criteria. I don't know if they've kept it up. And then I would also just say, you know, a lot of times I would not go crazy and try and search the universe. A lot of times start with what your mentor has and go from there. If for some reason you're finding that maybe your mentor's not funded or just doesn't know, that would be another thing. But generally you follow the path of your mentor or advisor, because in some ways it sounds cliche, but if that funding agency says, oh, Dr. So-and-so, yes, we funded him, now his protege is coming along, let's fund them. That is what happens a lot of times in peer review. So I wouldn't drive yourself crazy trying to collect a huge amount. I would start first with what your mentor, where they get their funding, and then go from there. But yeah, there's just a lot out there. We have some links on that list that we provided. And in terms of international funding opportunities for international students, generally it's universities that have high percentages of international students that have the best list.
Okay, thank you. So we have two questions that I'm gonna kind of merge them because they're kind of similar. So we have an attendee asking about when is a good time to look and start applying or start writing the grant. You kind of gave a bit of a timeline with the 4 to 6, maybe even 9 months for NIH, right? But that connects with the second question, which I think it's kind of like in preparation. So a graduate student is asking if they should start looking for postdoc grants and start preparing and writing for that before they enter their postdoc, like while they're still a graduate student. And if so, and if let's say if there is something like that they can apply beforehand, then if they get that grant or that fellowship, does that mean if they're a graduate student at FAU and if they apply and get a grant, they have to stay at FAU for their postdoc? Because those are two questions, but yeah, one, can a graduate student start thinking or should start thinking, and can they apply for a postdoc fellowship before they finish?
I think like Jeannie said, what's frustrating is that it depends. It really does depend. With NIH, which I'm most familiar with, they may not allow you to apply until you've been there for a certain period of time. But at the same time, they do have certain mechanisms. I want to say it's the F-32. And I'm double checking that. See, the F-32 does allow you to apply for something before you enter your postdoc. You can apply for it when you're a postdoc. So they also have a funding opportunity where you can apply in your second to third year of doctoral study to finish your doctoral studies and then begin a postdoc. So for that graduate student, that's an NIH mechanism. It might not be the case for other agencies. So that's why we say it depends.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I would also add that and when you're talking about a grad student as well, I mean, I know that we don't have undergrads on here, but there's always going to be the bridging, right? And so there's plenty of opportunities for undergraduates to bridge into graduate and graduate into postdoc. So I mean, again, it has to do with, you can never be over prepared. It's just there is no such thing. And being prepared means doing something a little every day. You know, putting it on the back burner for too long and then jumping all over it, it's not the advisable way of handling those types of things. Keeping your CV up to date, dedicating time on your calendar to writing. I do know that some people had asked some questions of whether or not ORD would help with reviewing things. And yes, we will do that. Hopefully that doesn't mean that we're going to all of a sudden get flooded. But we recognize that you need to do your homework too. So there's plenty of resources out there to show you, at least get you started on the right path of how to write a strong proposal. Much like Angela had pointed out, proposal writing is not the same thing as academic writing, and you got to be clear about that. It is truly a sales technique. So I would just say that when it comes to, timeline, it's what time is now. So if you know, I know a lot of postdocs and maybe some of the grad students need some direction. Now would be a good time. Now would be a good time for you to start. So that would be my answer now.
Awesome. So I don't see any raised hands, but I am getting a lot of questions on the Q&A. So I'm going to keep going with those questions. But again, guys, if you want to join with video or with your microphone, just feel free to do so. Just raise your hands and I'll give you the word. So some postdocs are asking if, as a postdoc, can they write a grant for research money as opposed to a fellowship just to their salaries while they are postdocs. Sorry.
So can they? It depends on what's available.
Yeah, a research grant. I guess the question is if they can apply to a grant as the PI.
So one of the interesting things that came up about this is when we were talking about, you know, giving advice to postdocs. Let's say a postdoc you're a postdoc and you found a funding opportunity that fits perfectly with the type of research that you want to do. This is where your relationship with your FAU mentor is so critical, because the possibility exists that you yourself as a postdoc, because you are not eligible to be the PI on that maybe your mentor could be the PI and you're the co-I. You have to work that out with your mentor. We're not suggesting that, because, you know, I know that there has a lot to do with your intellectual contribution into a particular award, but that's why it's so important to have a strong relationship with your mentor and have that understanding. I can't imagine that there's a mentor here that would have a problem with it, but again, it has to fit well with what's going on in that research. There's very few opportunities for pure what I would say grant money. But then again, a lot of the fellowships that are out there give a piece of the money that's not only the stipend part, but give you research dollars that go along with it. I always have to say it's the caveat for everything. It depends. It depends on what you're going for, the discipline you're in. Lots of times in the arts and humanities, which I tend to work in quite a bit, things like Fulbrights are not really postdoctoral fellowships, but Fulbrights are awards that they pay you to go to a host country to do research. So because until you're a PhD, you don't get the actual scholar one. You can go in as a, you know, or you're a PhD, you can go into Fulbright and do research in a host country for a year. So those are just other suggestions. But your case, you're probably very unique. So we can't like sit there and say, do it this way. Yeah.
Makes sense. Another question is still related to grants, but now transition grants like the K-99. They're asking if the office provides support with that, maybe helping reviewing before submission or giving some guidance for any postdocs that are planning on submitting for a K-99 or maybe an RSAD, any kind of transition grant.
I'm going to leave anything NIH to Angela.
The answer is yes. And I did wanted to mention earlier too, for those hybrid NIH mechanisms where it's F99, K00, and K99, R00, those are generally one of the few where non-citizens can apply. But yeah, we do offer assistance. One of the reasons we didn't go into detail in this presentation as well is that we have a separate set of slides module on NIH-F mechanisms, NIH-K mechanisms in our Canvas portal. And what we tried to do there is give an overview, give you a chance to sort of learn more in detail if you're a good fit. We're starting to put templates there, standard boilerplate language there. I don't know if she's on the phone, but I had the pleasure of working with a great postdoc on a K-99 recently. And she pretty much had it all together, but there were certain details about FAU, about our diversity programming and about certain things like that she couldn't put her fingers on. And so in that case, we have boilerplate to help with those particular grants. And so we keep those in our Canvas site.
Awesome. Okay, so we talked about all of these external opportunities. One of our postdocs are asking if there are internal grants or fellowships at FAU, so offered by FAU to support postdocs?
Well, is it a formal title of a fellowship? No, but as I said, a lot of the postdoctoral positions, they're still funded in some respects by FAU. So even if you're on a grant with a faculty member and the grant's covering a good chunk, or maybe even all the stipend portion, I mean, technically FAU is still putting forth, whether it be in terms of fringe benefit or other types of things. So it's not like we have a specific grant program where you say, here's a fellowship for any FAU postdoc to apply to. We're getting there, I think, as we start to grow and we start putting funding aside. I know that the pillars were probably more likely to fund postdoc positions, but all the colleges offer those kinds of positions. I did want to also elaborate just a tiny bit on another mechanism, and Karen Scarpinato had pointed this out, that you might be a postdoc now, but there's opportunities for you to transition into what's called a senior research fellow. That's being worked on currently, so that you would then become somebody eligible to be able to be the PI. So it's not like it's one or the other. You don't have to go get the grant before you're the senior research fellow, but it could be, again, it's that bridge funding. Let's say you're a postdoc now, you're funded through somebody else's research, but that you might apply for your own money, then you'd convert into like a senior research fellow. It's still being worked on as to how much money do you need to have from an internal source or whatever. So right now there is that mechanism at FAU.
Okay. So yeah, so I guess there is no specific program or a competition for, like, let's say a pilot grant or a small grant that postdocs can like submit their applications and get some specific money on it. Okay. I guess that's mainly what they wanted to ask. Let's see. We have some more coming in here. So, okay, citizenship, we covered that. It really depends on the eligibility of each grant. It should be quite easy to see that on the proposal, right? To identify if you are eligible or not, right? When would be the best time to contact your office if you need any support? As soon as you found out about a grant that they're interested in applying, or once they have a draft of, you know, their science justification, at least like an outline of what it is that they want to propose?
Go ahead, Angela.
I would go ahead and say even before you have a draft. To me, the sooner the better. We emphasize writing a lot, and the writing sounding wonderful and getting the writing just so. But there's so many other supplemental details that you might need to be aware of that we'd want to sit with you and just make sure you coordinate it with your contact and sponsor programs and your research administrator on getting certain, you know, there's a person in your college that helps with budget and things like that. So we kind of, Jeannie alluded to the whole person. Grant submissions is a process that's beyond just the writing. So we'd want to connect you with other people that might be involved in the preparation of your proposal. Resources, things like that. If you need statistical help, you know, getting a good sample size, if you need advising on the study design. So I would say before you even have a draft would be ideal.
Do you guys know if there is, let's say that you know of a particular institute that would fit well with your field of study, and probably that's where you should apply and get your money from. Let's say an institute at NIH. Do they have, can you like sign up for notifications and get notified when a new competition becomes available?
Oh yeah, all of the federal agencies, including grants.gov, you can do, I mean, you can sign up for so many things that you'll be like Mickey Mouse in the sorcerer, because it'll be just too much in your inbox. But that's not a bad thing, because you can always organize your inbox to have certain things. Just go to a folder and you set a calendar appointment and go through those opportunities. But you can have, NIH has just a ton of different newsletters that get sent out. And even I would recommend even getting newsletters at a higher level about just what's going on at NIH. It gives you an idea of what to look for in the future, and just don't get narrowly focused on a specific institute or center, because you just never know. Um, I did want to kind of point out, because I know we've talked about NIH and NSF, and I think there was a question on the Q&A regarding other things other than science. And so public health, things that have to do with management, things that have to do with the social sciences, there are plenty of, and I did provide links on the supplementary document as well. But again, when you do grants forward and you do other searches, there are opportunities out there. In fact, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, I think NIH even has a public health management policy kind of track as well. Like, you could look for funding that way. Is that correct? I mean, maybe not for postdoc, but.
Well, NIH has I think we put the link on there just for postdoc funding mechanisms, definitely. And I also wanted to make a plug, a shameless plug. We published an ebook last year called Dare to Make an Impact. And we have a chapter on there for folks that are looking for funding in the arts and humanities and the social sciences. So that, we don't want you to feel left out and feel like this is all about NIH and NSF. I don't know if you were getting at this, Jeannie, but you're right. NIH does have an Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research. So you might be somebody in psychology, and you might be able to be funded under there depending on what outcome you're looking at.
Great, that's awesome, because I was about to get to that question, so already answered.
And we'll make sure we provide the link as well at the end of this webinar, when we send you out the supplementary document, or the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs sends it out. We can also send you the link to Dare to Make an Impact. It's a really useful tool, no matter what stage you are in your research career. It's just filled with wonderful tips and advice. So we'll make sure we have that link as well.
Okay. Does anybody else want to ask a question or want to maybe share their experience with an issue that they had before applying to a grant or something like that? Please feel free to join us on these last few minutes. It would be nice to actually hear from one of our postdocs or even grad students. So you're welcome to join as well. Does anyone have anything to add or contribute?
Everybody's hiding. That's okay, though. We just wanted to make sure that it was open dialogue. If they don't have anything to really talk about, at least they can come to Angela and I when they're ready.
And I just wanted to do a shout out. I've been fortunate to work with a couple of postdocs, and you guys are tireless. And for the most part, I haven't had to do that much. I give one little snippet and they take it from there and said, okay, I got it, but we're here if you need. But I've worked with some really great resourceful postdocs. And so, I would just add that, trust that your area, your niche, and to look in that direction. Just kudos to you guys who've been working on it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we all want to get that money. Sometimes it's just not easy. So yeah, it's good to know that, you guys are there for us, and you have some resources that you can at least direct us to as well. So that's good. That's great. It's great to know. And I think it's very important because a lot of us are really aware even, right? Mm-hmm. I would like to mention again, guys, that we've been talking about this supplementary document. You don't have that yet. So, don't worry if you don't see that on your inbox or you can't access here through the Zoom. So you're going to receive that. You're going to receive an email from the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs after our talk. So if you've participated in one of our webinars, you may have gotten an email like that before. It's kind of a thank you for joining us and a survey. So when you get that email, if you open that, the link and all of these documents, the I'm not sure now if it's a link or if it's a, what is it called?
The supplementary document is an actual Word document, and then we'll give you a link to.
Okay, okay, it's a Word document. Okay, yeah, so an attachment. I wasn't sure if it was an attachment or I forgot the word. Okay, so you guys are going to receive that. So keep an eye on for an email from the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs or Gina, and this document's going to be there. So make sure you check it out because there's going to be a lot of detailed information. We do have a limited time, so they couldn't, you know, they wanted to give us the big picture, right? They didn't have time to really get into much details on everything, but this document is going to be very helpful. So make sure you keep an eye on that on your inbox. You should be receiving that later today. Okay, I don't see any other questions here. I think we have covered everything. Yeah, I think we covered most of it. Maybe one or two questions. If there was any questions missing, they're going to reply to that later, and we're going to post it on the Postdoctoral Affairs website. So there is actually a recording of all of our webinars in there in case you missed any of any of them. You can go check it out, and there's usually also a document with any remaining questions from the webinars. So I would like to really thank you, Jeannie and Angela, again for this great webinar. It was awesome to hear from you guys, and yeah, hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Definitely. Go Owls. Woo!
Thanks everyone for joining, postdocs and grad students. You know, you guys are always here and you're welcome. You're welcome to come. So it's good to see that you guys are getting involved as well. All right, well, we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.